Quorum being present, the Subcommittee on National Security and Foreign Affairs, the hearing entitled U.S. Aid to Pakistan, Part 2, Planning and Accountability, will come to order. I ask unanimous consent that only the Chairman and Ranking Member of the Subcommittee be allowed to make opening statements, and without objection, it's so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the hearing record be kept open for 5 business days so that all members of the Subcommittee be allowed to submit a written statement for the record. Without objection, so ordered. Good morning. I want to thank you both for coming here today. We're going to continue our ongoing oversight of the planning, accountability, and effectiveness of U.S. aid to Pakistan. On October 15, 2009, President Obama signed the Enhanced Partnership with Pakistan Act. It's informally known as the Kerry-Lugar-Berman Bill, tripling U.S. civilian economic and development assistance to Pakistan to $1.5 billion annually until 2014. While Kerry-Lugar-Berman was a largely bipartisan demonstration of the United States' commitment to a long-term assistance to Pakistan, serious concerns remain regarding the ability of USAID and the State Department to effectively and efficiently manage and account for such a massive increase in assistance. In November 2009, I led a congressional delegation to Pakistan in order to investigate, among other things, the status of the U.S. assistance programs in the State Department's and the USAID's capacity to manage and oversee Kerry-Lugar-Berman funding. After 4 trips, it is apparent that the security environment in Pakistan has grown markedly worse in recent years. During the congressional delegation, we met with Pakistan's civilian leadership, its political opposition, and a wide variety of civil society members, NGOs, and international contractors. We also traveled to Peshawar to deliver aid supplies directly to the principal hospital that had been receiving wounded from the many bombings during the past year. Following that trip, in December 2009, the administration announced its new regional stabilization strategy for Afghanistan and Pakistan. That plan will, I quote, increase direct assistance through Pakistani institutions, close quote, namely the ministries and local NGOs, and focus more money on high-impact projects such as major energy and water infrastructure. The plan also promises to reduce USAID's over-reliance on large international contractors as implementing partners. I want to state at the outset that I'm supportive of exploring a new aid approach and appreciative of the time and energy that our witnesses and the administration have put into crafting the administration's new strategy. That said, given the importance of U.S. national security interests in Pakistan and the magnitude of the United States taxpayer dollars authorized for development and economic assistance there, it is critically important that we carefully scrutinize plans for implementation of the new strategy, and particularly its accountability mechanisms. In short, we must make certain that the administration's new strategy will not send more money through weaker systems that lack the internal controls developed with time and experience. This presents several challenges. First, how will the State Department and USAID gain visibility into the operations of ministries that have historically resisted robust oversight? In light of Pakistan's sensitivities regarding impingements on its sovereignty, this challenge will be particularly acute. Second, I'm concerned about USAID's internal capacity to oversee and account for funds directed through Pakistan's ministries and local NGOs. For years, USAID has been marginalized and stripped of personnel, while at the same time, United States foreign policy has increasingly emphasized aid delivery in high-risk conflict and post-conflict countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. This challenge is only made more difficult by the current security environment that makes it very difficult for either USAID personnel or Western expats to see, let alone actively manage or oversee, many projects, particularly those in the federally administered tribal areas of Fatah and the Northwest Frontier Province. I plan to continue to work with Congress and the administration to bolster USAID's internal staffing and capability. We must reverse USAID's decline in the last decade if it is to serve as a central tool of U.S. foreign policy in South Asia and the Middle East, a task that has been assigned but not given the tools to fulfill. I also want to highlight the recent challenges that the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad has had in obtaining visas from Pakistan for critical U.S. government personnel from State, USAID, and the Department of Defense. Many of the visa applications have been denied or delayed, including visas for auditors, accountants, and inspectors, the very people that both the agencies and the Congress rely on to make sure that civilian assistance is spent as it is intended. From the position as Chairman of the National Security and Foreign Affairs Subcommittee, I want to make clear to the government of Pakistan that the United States civilian assistance comes as a package: funding, programming, and oversight. Pakistan cannot accept the funding but deny United States agencies the personnel or the access for critical oversight. I ask both witnesses here today to keep the subcommittee informed regarding developments with the visa applications for their agencies' respective personnel, and to only fund programs and projects for which they have the personnel in place to perform the proper oversight. The third issue of concern to me is to ensure that U.S. funds directed to Pakistan's ministries are supplementing Pakistan's funding of those ministries, not simply displacing it. At the end of the day, the government of Pakistan must own and take responsibility for each of the projects we embark on together. Instilling a sense of such ownership will be a critical and delicate challenge going forward. I'm a strong believer that the United States civilian assistance to Pakistan is critical to the stabilization and the health of Pakistan and to long-term United States national security interests. The Kerry-Luga-Burman is a major down payment on our shared future. In the best circumstances, however, it is an extraordinary endeavor to create, manage, and oversee billions of dollars in development assistance programs, and Pakistan is not in the best of circumstances. That's why the subcommittee has made a great effort to exercise proactive oversight in order to ensure that critical accountability mechanisms are in place from day one. With that said, I'd like to defer to my colleague, Mr. Flake, for his opening remarks.
I thank the chairman, thank him for holding this hearing and also undertaking the CODEL a while ago. I wish I could have gone. It would have been helpful, and I look forward to the testimony today. It was interesting when this aid package was announced, certainly in Pakistan. I don't think any aid package has been met with such derision and from the recipients, and it certainly piqued our interest here to see how it was played there. Obviously, we know it was for domestic politics, but I think it's safe to say that it's difficult to see or to assume that any country could receive this amount of aid and be able to transition that quickly, and as well as our aid agencies to ramp up this substantially in this short period of time, as the chairman said, in the best of circumstances, and these are not the best. So I look forward to the testimony and for all you have to say.
Thank you. Just a quick aside to that. After the Kerry-Luga-Burman bill passed, and this committee had quite a bit to do with that, as Jeff knows, and so we had an occasion to speak both in Pakistan and back here at home. But what's indicative, I think, is one occasion up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I spoke before a few hundred Pakistanis, and when I got through, one half of the room was mad that we had put the sanctions on, not the sanctions, but the conditions, and the other half of the room was mad because they weren't strong enough. Yeah. And they were all Pakistani, so it depends on how you break down on that. So with that, we'd love to hear from our witnesses. We have 5-minute remarks, as you know. We swear our witnesses in on this committee, so I ask the witnesses to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Thank you. Let the record please reflect that both witnesses answered in the affirmative. I'd like to give a brief introduction of our witnesses, if I can find them. Here we are. Mr. Daniel Feldman serves as a deputy to the Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan at the United States Department of State. He previously served as Director of Multilateral and Humanitarian Affairs for the National Security Council, where he was responsible for global human rights issues. A former congressional staff member, Mr. Feldman has also served as Counsel and Communications Advisor to the Senate Homeland Security and the Government Affairs Committee. Mr. Feldman holds a B.A. from Tufts University in Massachusetts and from Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School and a J.D. from Columbia University Law School. Mr. James Beaver currently serves as Director of the Afghanistan-Pakistan Task Force at the United States Agency for International Development, where he oversees more than $4 billion in U.S. assistance to Afghanistan and Pakistan. A member of the Senior Foreign Service, Mr. Beaver previously served as Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Middle East, providing leadership for $2.5 billion in U.S. assistance to the Middle East and North Africa. Mr. Beaver holds a B.A. from Cornell University and an M.S. from Georgetown University. Again, thank you both for making yourselves available today and for sharing your considerable expertise. You both are experienced witnesses before Congress, so I know you know the drill. 5 minutes if you can. Keep it reasonably close to that. We have all read or will read your remarks, and then we'd like to get to the question and answer period if we could. Mr. Feldman, let's start with you, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman Tierney and Ranking Member Flake for the opportunity to be here and to discuss our efforts to enhance planning and accountability of U.S. development assistance to Pakistan. I will give a more pared down and focused version of the written testimony, just so we have a kind of baseline for our conversation afterwards, and then I'll also welcome the opportunity to speak afterwards. Once we start Q&A, I'm happy to address the visa situation or some of the other specific issues you raised in your opening statement. As you know, Pakistan faces threats of many forms. The security situation weighs heavily on all Pakistanis. Too many of the country's citizens do not have access to functioning health or education systems. Pakistan's energy crisis leaves businesses and homes in the dark many hours of the day, and the looming water crisis poses an existential threat to Pakistan and its neighbors. All these factors increase the stakes on the effectiveness of our assistance programs. Your committee rightly identifies the crucial role of proper planning and oversight in the success of our efforts. Since 2002, when the U.S. re-engaged with Pakistan, a large percentage of our civilian assistance has been tied up in large contracts and grants with U.S. organizations that have produced uneven results, have lacked flexibility, have not provided optimum value, and have not built sufficient Pakistani capacity. Much of our past programming did not address the issues most important to Pakistanis, such as energy and water. Pakistanis believed that a high percentage of U.S. resources did not reach them, given our work and our people have been mostly invisible to the average citizens of the country. And the average Pakistani has perceived our assistance as being too strongly tied to their country's military and intelligence cooperation with the U.S., rather than being aimed toward the long-term well-being of the country's citizens. All this pointed to a very large and expensive missed opportunity, which we have tried to rectify over the course of the past 14 months. USG assistance in Pakistan now aims to expand our relationship beyond predominantly security issues, providing instead a more balanced approach that will help the Pakistani people overcome the political, social, and economic challenges that threaten the country's stability. As you referenced in the regional stability stabilization strategy that we circulated earlier to the Hill, we hope to address, first of all, the immediate energy, water, and related economic crises. Second, support broader economic and political reforms that are necessary for political growth, for sustainable growth. 3, improve health care and education. 4, help Pakistan respond to the humanitarian challenges caused by extremist violence and natural disasters. And 5, combat extremism. We have a remarkable opportunity before us to deliver this more effective and balanced environment for delivering civilian assistance. This is formed in large part, as you noted, by the passage of the Enhanced Partnership with Pakistan Act, the Kerry Lugar-Berman legislation, as well as the initiatives that have been undertaken thus far by President Obama, Secretary Clinton, Ambassador Holbrooke, and others in the executive branch. How we're responding to these opportunities is through several broad categories of a reformulated vision towards assistance. First of all is the emphasis on smaller and more flexible contracts. To provide more flexibility and improve monitoring and oversight, we're shifting away from large U.S.-based contracts to smaller, predominantly Pakistani ones with fewer sub-grants and subcontracts. These will be managed by our increased number of staff in the field. Second is decentralization. Within the next few months, USAID teams will be placed in Lahore and Karachi, in addition to the current offices in Islamabad and Peshawar. A decentralized programming platform will enable more location-appropriate development activities at the provincial and district level, make it easier for U.S. officials in the field to oversee and monitor programs and prevent fraud, and allow more regular engagement between our personnel and the populations we aim to benefit. Third is the meaningful assistance. Relevant and effective assistance must materially address the issues that count most to the average Pakistani. The overwhelming message conveyed to the Secretary and Ambassador Holbrooke during their visits to Pakistan was the need for assistance with the country's chronic power and water shortages. In response, we have begun projects to reduce the hours of power blackouts, make more potable water available to poor communities, and improve the availability and management of irrigation water for farms. As these projects move quickly from feasibility to implementation, we will begin the same process for projects that address other priority Pakistani needs, including medical and educational facilities. Fourth is the increased assistance, as you mentioned, provided through and to Pakistani institutions. In order to maximize the amount of our resources that will remain in Pakistan, we are transitioning our assistance modalities. We'll do so by decreasing our reliance on large international contractors and an aim instead to build institutional capacity and sustainability by increasing direct assistance through Pakistani implementing partners. While these arrangements involve transfers to Pakistani institutions, this is not blank check budget support. Instead, they are the results of negotiations with USAID regarding how the funds will be spent, how progress will be monitored, and how the financial arrangements will be implemented. In the case of budget support transfers, they'll be for targeted institutions and uses rather than general budget support as was previously provided in the past. And all this goes to the issue of improved accountability and oversight. Our stated policy goal of working more through Pakistani institutions does have the potential to contribute to corruption, as we recognize. To mitigate this risk, we are increasing the number of direct hire contracting staff and Inspector General personnel that will reside in Pakistan. We're also expanding the use of Pakistani public accounting firms to conduct financial audits of funds provided to Pakistani NGOs, train Pakistani public accounting firms and Pakistan's Auditor General on how to conduct audits to U.S. standards, help the Pakistan Auditor General conduct financial audits of funds provided to Pakistan government entities, and build the capacity of the Pakistan government to carry out or assist with investigations and coordinate audits and investigations among the U.S. Inspectors General and the government and the GAO. In the past 2 months, over $26 million in contracts to buttress audit and monitoring capabilities in Pakistan have been awarded using ESF. The Secretary, Ambassador Holbrooke, our entire team at the Special Representative's Office who work on Pakistan believe we have a duty to ensure that USG resources are used for the purposes intended by Congress, and the reforms I've outlined will, over time, decrease costs for assistance programs, increase the amount of U.S. assistance directly benefiting the Pakistani people and Pakistani institutions, and ensure much better development effects. I'm happy to talk about any of the details.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Mr. Beaver.
Thank you very much, Chairman Tierney, Ranking Member Flake, other distinguished members of the committee, and thanks for your invitation to USAID to speak with you this morning. Chairman, I particularly appreciate your long-standing support for rebuilding America's Foreign Assistance Agency, especially the staffing. Thank you, sir. When USAID reopened its mission in Pakistan in 2002, I had just come back from serving 4 years in India as the Deputy Mission Director. I was then serving as the Director for South Asian Affairs, and of course Pakistan and had become, and Afghanistan, our biggest responsibilities at that time. As you know, we started out with a very large cash transfer at that point to the government of Pakistan, and then gradually grew that into primary health care and education attention in coordination with other donors. Following President Obama's strategy review, we now have a focus on forging new partnerships with Pakistan and with Pakistani entities, as well as rebuilding the capacity of Pakistan public institutions as well as its private institutions, and affecting lives of individual Pakistanis. I'm going to talk just briefly about the civilian assistance strategy, about local implementation through Pakistani institutions, some of the safeguard mechanisms, FATA development, and a little bit on democracy governance. As you know, under the Enhanced Partnership with Pakistan Act, which authorizes a tripling of U.S. civilian assistance, bringing our funding up to $1.5 billion annually as a target. Our three foci, if you will, for our assistance is on infrastructure and constraints to infrastructure for development in Pakistan. Second is on building the capacity of the government of Pakistan to deliver key and appreciated services to its people and to improve the connectivity between the people, the governed and the governing. And finally, to improve the capacity of the Pakistan institutions to be able to implement on their own. In terms of our presence in the country, as you know, at the time actually that I served in Pakistan, which was as a division chief for energy assistance about 26 years ago in the war against the Soviets next door, we had many American AID officers in Islamabad and elsewhere around the country. And as a matter of fact, we were the second largest staffed operation in the world next to Egypt at that time. Today, although of course we had a large hiatus in the 90s, we have about 35 U.S. Foreign Service officers at our aid operation, plus another couple dozen what we call U.S. Personal Service contractors, and over 100 Foreign Service nationals. But this is much smaller than we had back in the years during the 1980s. But thanks to the Enhanced Partnership Act, we do plan to increase these levels in consultation with the embassy colleagues and Ambassador Patterson and our colleagues here in Washington. We will be increasing our American staff significantly, as well as our Pakistani staff, which is extremely important. Our Pakistani staff, who are world-class, are our eyes, our ears, and our brains, and our continuity from one American rotation, if you will, to another. So we'll be building up our project management capability, our financial oversight capability, and our procurement capability, and our legal capability, and I can go into more of that if you would like. We will also be focusing more on the provinces not just the federal government in Islamabad, which is extremely important, but also the legitimate provincial government authorities who, for example, have responsibility for education in the country of Pakistan. In terms of local implementation, we will be moving to find ways, and we're already aggressively pursuing this, to diversify our mechanisms and our partners. And I think this is sound U.S. foreign policy. I think it's sound U.S. foreign assistance technique. It's not to the exclusion of our existing partners. There will be a role for them too, but we are trying to broaden and diversify the players who can deliver the American assistance program and also strengthen their capabilities, whether it's in the government, private sector, or civil society in Pakistan. In terms of oversight and monitoring, my colleague Dan Feldman has already addressed those. I can go into some of those in more detail later. I just want to stress that we believe in AID that the IG and the GAO are our best friends. They're like our family physician that travel with us. And we may not always like the techniques they use to identify what's needed in our health, but it's good to know what the diagnostics are so we can deal with them. And we coordinate closely with them accordingly. In FATA, I will just say that we're very proud, despite very dangerous situations in the FATA and the federal administered tribal areas, we have been able to implement over $140 million of social and economic support projects, mostly at the community level, in all 7 of the FATA agencies and in all 6 of the frontier regions. I have to stress, Mr. Chairman and other members, in my own view, having spent 9 years living in South Asia and in other dangerous parts of the world, additional years, this is the bravest, most courageous, riskiest, but most overdue action that I can think of in the U.S. Foreign Assistance Program. In democracy governance, one thing I would like to just state specifically is that we will continue to support the government of Pakistan in its development of its own parliament, and we are providing assistance to the government of Pakistan to construct a capability so that there are staff support for the members of its modular shura of its parliament, and to help them with rule of law, however complicated and challenging that is, because it is those values that connect most deeply among the Pakistani people when you think of democracy and governance. In closing, I just want to say thank you again for inviting us, and I want to just dedicate our testimony today to those very brave American, third country national, and Pakistani staff at our embassy, including our AID mission, who risk their lives every day to carry out U.S. foreign policy and to make Pakistan a better, more representative government. Thank you, sir.
Well, I want to thank both of you witnesses. And Mr. Beaver, I appreciate your latter remarks. I'm sure Mr. Flake and the other members here do as well. We don't mention often enough the serious sacrifices being made by those families, the important role they play, even though we do have Admiral Mullen and most of our generals over there talking about the fact that this cannot be won solely militarily and that we have to have people willing to do those jobs. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Let me start. We're going to start the 5-minute rounds of questioning on that. I'd like to start just by reading to you both a quote from an economic officer at USAID who filed this dissenting cable on October 2, 2009. In it says, the USAID mission in Pakistan is receiving contradictory objectives from Ambassador Holbrooke. On the one hand, it is expected to achieve high-impact counterinsurgency and broad-based economic development objectives as quickly as possible, especially in those areas more susceptible to radical Taliban recruitment. On the other hand, it is asked to do this by working through national and local government channels and host country contractors and NGOs, and not through U.S. contractors and NGOs, to avoid the overhead charges of the latter and to improve the institutional capacity and legitimacy of government agencies and local institutions. These are all worthy goals, and USAID can achieve them all. However, they are contradictory objectives without a reasonable transition period for the latter. Can you give me your reaction to that statement and what we're doing to address those concerns?
Chairman Tierney, that's, we certainly value the dissent channel quite a bit. This was an issue that came up at the very outset of our move to push towards more local Pakistani implementers. We've had a variety of meetings in post and briefings with staff and members about this. I think that was a concern at the very outset of this process. We have not.
It was a concern while we were there at about that time.
Yeah, it was. So last the announcement initially was at the end of the fiscal year, and so right around September 30th, October 1st, at the time this this cable was written. There was a lot of anxiety, I think, because of a lack of communication about exactly what would be done, how quickly we were going to start this initiative. I think that we have certainly worked our way through virtually all of those concerns at this point. Primarily, we started a review of every major contract through, and I think there were a lot of existing contractors, including NGOs and others, who were quite concerned that the contract may end in 90 days or something like that. We wouldn't be able to do it. We have thus far only terminated one contract in the last 4 or 5 months since this review has happened. It was only a $2.5 million contract. Everything else has continued through the next year.
And nobody's been asked to wind down, or
none of them are winding down. We said that if they were going to wind down, we would give them a 45-day notice. None of that has happened, and none of that. We don't have the intent for anything like that to happen. What we have done is, I think, put the international contracting community on notice that for new contracts, and as we start expending and dispersing most of this new Kerry Lugar-Berman money and others, we are looking to first instance to Pakistani implementers and NGOs to build the capacity, as I discussed. We have always said that we will reserve the right that if there is not the ability or capacity there, that we will continue using international contractors. We work actively with the international NGO community as well as the local Pakistani NGOs. In fact, we have on Ambassador Holbrook's staff someone dedicated just to NGO relationships and working with NGOs on these issues. So we're in no way trying to terminate that, but we are trying, as I outlined in the opening statement, to really build local capacity and to do that as quickly and effectively as possible. So I think that we are well beyond those problems, but I defer to Jim to see what his sense is.
Thanks. Can both of you gentlemen assure the subcommittee that you'll keep it informed regarding the visa issue, developments on that, and regarding your agency's personnel, and give us some assurance that you'll only fund those programs and projects for which personnel are in place to perform the adequate oversight?
On the issue of visas, there has been a backlog, but and it was very problematic. But we have made very substantial progress over the last few months on the visa issue, working very closely with the government of Pakistan. Ambassador Haqqani is in our office very frequently, giving us updates on that issue. I think there was a backlog of about 500 visas in January. It's down to I believe less than 200 at this point. So we are actively moving through those, and we've made it very clear that this is in the best interests not only of us but of the Pakistanis, since many of these are auditors, in order to be able to go through the
exactly the point. And we need some assurances that we're not going to start spending this money without those auditors and other people in place to monitor it. Mr. Beaver?
Yeah, if I could just comment, I share Dan's concerns about this. Of particular concern to us are when we have visa problems for inspectors general from Manila, or of our security people that we need from our Washington security office, who we need to get out to post to consult with our own internal security people to make sure that the lives of our employees, be they Pakistani or American, are safeguarded as much as possible. Without the ability to have an independent inspector general function out there at post, or without the ability to keep our people as safe as is reasonable given the risks, we will not be able to function as productively, and we would have to change the way we do our business, or even think through what business we do.
Well, so can I take that as a yes, that we will not be spending this money where there is not the adequate personnel for auditing and oversight in place?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Whereas the
Feldman says yes. Mr. Beaver, you say yes as well?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Flake.
Thank you. Thank you for the testimony. When we're talking about building capacity with the institutions there, you mentioned that you're trying to hire firms, Pakistani CPA firms and others, to audit a lot of this. How is that going so far? How much capacity needs to be built there before you can transition a lot of the work from international contractors? Mr. Feldman?
Yeah, maybe I could start,
okay, go ahead.
Congressman. Well, AID has a long history of doing pre-award audits, for example, and of seeking to build local capacity, including through our Inspector General operations. They often will reach out to local CPA firms affiliated with international CPA firms, Americans in particular, So in many of the countries we work, including in Pakistan, there is some depth there for us to work with. We've now have in place a number of CPA, local Pakistani CPA firms, and we have asked our IG to give us the, I would say, the good housekeeping seal of approval on those local Pakistani firms, so that we know that when we use them, they're ones that our own IG, Inspector General Operation, are comfortable with. So we would often go to those that have also worked, for example, to do the audit, financial audit work for the World Bank, or for the British, or for the Asian Development Bank. So we try a number of different ways to go about this to make sure we get good, high-quality operations to do that internal audit.
And I would just add, although I defer to Jim on the specific numbers, but we've been actively seeking to increase those number of pre-vetted Pakistani CPA firms. I think it has gone from 5 or 6 at the end of last year to close to 20 at this point. I've seen between 16 and 20. I know we're in the process of vetting quite a number of them. And then in terms of the actual pre-award surveys, I believe over 100 Pakistani organizations have been identified for pre-award surveys, and about roughly 40 are completed or underway. And so the process of vetting on the financial and accounting side is very much underway at a very robust level.
We mentioned the reaction to the conditions that was placed on the money by the Pakistani government. Have they reconciled with that? Are they okay? And is their displeasure manifested in other areas or areas other than visas? And just tell me how that process is going.
I think that I was very actively involved in the aftermath of the Kerry Lugar-Berman legislation, and I worked with Chairman Berman, Chairman Kerry, and Foreign Minister Qureshi when he was here to try to work through some of these issues, including the ultimate production by the Congress of the joint explanatory statement on Kerry Lugar-Berman. It was a backlash which we perhaps should have anticipated, but we didn't. It had been so long in the making, and there had been so much news about it that we didn't expect this. I think it's fair to say that a large part of this was ginned up for domestic political purposes. That once we were able to get the explanatory statement out, and once people were actually able to focus on what is actually in it, I mean, I think there was so much misinformation about this, then impinging on the sovereignty of the Pakistani government, on what exactly, how onerous the conditions might be, what sorts of reporting there may be. Once we were able to get through that initial few weeks and actually get people to read what the legislation actually did and what it would require and what the opportunities were, it's been a much more cooperative, facilitative environment. I think having Senator Kerry there to explain it was very, very helpful, including with the Parliament. The Secretary's trip, I think, really was a kind of turning point, and at one point she said quite bluntly in a town hall, look, if you don't want it, don't take it. And I think since that point, we've really kind of turned the corner, and we have not seen any sort of kind of negative press like this over the last few months.
If I may just add, there is one important evolution now over about 8 years ago. 8 years ago, when we did the first big cash transfers, $600 million, it was very difficult to get the Pakistan government to cooperate with us in certain ways we needed in order to have rights of audit in the right places we had to have them. But we now have an agreement with the Supreme Audit Institute of the government of Pakistan that will allow us, in fact, to audit and to have our auditors and our CPA firms and the Pakistan CPA firms enter in to audit wherever we feel we need to have it. That's an important step forward, and we've learned some lessons, and so has the government of Pakistan in this regard.
Very quickly, Mr. Beaver, the security situation in the FATA for our contractors and grantees, is it improving generally, or does it go up and down depending on government action in the area?
I would say the latter. It goes up and down. It is, of course, a risky place and a sometimes dangerous place. That has not stopped us from being able to help the FATA Secretariat and the FATA Development Authority from being able to do what they need to do with our help. But it requires a great deal of sensitivity, and particularly in Waziristan, of course, because of the fighting that has made it especially complicated. We're very mindful of the risks at play there, including for the Pakistanis that work with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Quigley, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I join you and other members in thanking your efforts in Pakistan. We recognize how difficult they are, but to get past the specific points today, how do we overcome what seems to be overwhelming distrust by the Pakistani people toward our government and our aid? My numbers may be old, but they're from last year, that 64% of the public see the U.S. as an enemy, and 9% of them see this as a partner. Obviously, this comes from many reasons. You would know better than myself, but obviously the drone attacks contribute to this significantly. And whether or not you can argue that those are a good idea, they seem to be having a very negative impact on how people react to us. And if at least in large part this is these efforts are to win the hearts and minds of the Pakistani people, gentlemen, doesn't it seem like they just blow away all your efforts? And no matter what you do and how much money we spend and how efficient we spend it, the drone attacks seem to be literally destroying our efforts to win the hearts and minds?
Congressman, I can't comment on the drone attacks, but I would say that the effort to rebuild our reputation and the relationship with the Pakistani people is the chief underlying framework of how we are proceeding with our relationship there. And it goes back again to the question I think that that Congressman Flake asked on Kerry Lugar Berman. There is a great degree of skepticism in Pakistan about America.
Do you think these numbers are in the ballpark?
I think they are in the ballpark. Yes, I think that we are working on moving them up. I think we have seen some increases. When Secretary Clinton was there, they certainly rose. I'm not sure where they currently stand right now, but yes, we are the perception of Americans is not a positive one, and it's formed by a history where they have seen our interest wax and wane based primarily on our security and military interest. They see it as a very self-interested relationship. They don't believe that we are interested in a longer-term relationship, and that's why so much of our work has been to emphasize that this is a long-term relationship, that it is based on a civilian relationship as well as a security one, that it's a people-to-people relationship. This was the entire theme of the Secretary's trip last fall, where she talked about turning the page and building this civilian relationship. And I think that it will take time to do, but I think that we're going in the right direction, and it has already showed some successes. I think it's in part given our many high-level principal visits. Ambassador Holbrooke has been there, I think, 8 times in the past year, is headed there again at the end of the month. Admiral Mullen has been there a number of times. The Secretary, obviously, President Obama referencing it. Obviously, the interest of Congress and Kerry Lugar Berman, but as well as the ongoing strategic dialogue, which Secretary Clinton is hosting here next week with Foreign Minister Qureshi leading the Pakistani delegation, and trying to demonstrate the breadth and depth of the issues that we have to discuss, rather than seeing it through the very narrow military security prism. So in terms of how we will how we're seeking to use the Kerry Lugar Berman money, it's to do exactly what you've said in some part. It's to have impact, to use the money obviously efficiently and to build sustainability. But as we've laid out in our regional stabilization strategy and others, we've also highlighted these high visibility, high impact projects in 5 or 6 different key areas, which is meant to demonstrate what America's commitment is over the long term in energy, as the Secretary announced on her visit, with $125 million towards efficiency mechanisms that put many more watts on the grid, but also in water, in agriculture, in health and education, and governance. And we're in the process of developing those right now, as we're also continuing the work that we've done in development in the country over the years. So we're very cognizant of that relationship, of the perception of the Pakistani people, and of trying to change that. And we are there for the long term, and we think that over time, as that becomes evident, that those perceptions will change.
If I may just add to that briefly, Chairman, I would just say what will be important to the Pakistani people, in my own experience, is that long-term commitment, and that's why I think the enhancing partnership with Pakistan Act is so important.
You don't want to react to my question as to how much of an impact the drone attacks have either?
I cannot comment on that, sir. I just know that what we're talking about here do not lend themselves to droneable solutions.
No, and Mr. Chairman, I know my time's up, and
some time now, yes.
No, and I appreciate. I think mine might have been 30 seconds, but the point being, a perusal of Pakistani newspapers, despite all your best efforts, seem to show that the drone attacks and again, whether or not we think it's rational, the trial of the female doctor are just blowing away all your efforts as it gets to the hearts and minds of the Pakistani people.
I would just comment on one thing on that is, if you read the Pakistani papers about the Kerry Lugar Berman thing, you've got an entirely different impression from what reality was on the ground, too. So I think
which is frustrating.
It is frustrating. It's hard to tell really what's going on, whether it's manipulation or accurate reporting on that. Mr. Lutkemeyer, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In some of the information we have here, there's a quote from June 29th of the New York Review, something to the effect that says, rather we can expect a slow, insidious, long-burning fuse of fear, terror, and paralysis that the Taliban have lit, and the state is unstable and partly unwilling to douse. With the recent arrests that have come about in Pakistan and their seemingly different approach to dealing with the Taliban, do you see an improvement in the government's ability to control its own destiny here, or is it still as unstable or more unstable than what the original comment was made almost a year ago?
We're certainly happy to offer any sort of briefings to you or others about the arrests and include the intel component, which I can't really speak to. I think that there are a number of indicators that our relationship with the government of Pakistan is on increasingly stable and more constructive grounds, and due to actions on both sides, and it's one that both we and the Pakistani government have invested a lot of time and effort into over the past 14 months, and I think that is beginning to show dividends.
Mr. Beaver, what's your thought?
I would just add that I think what we've seen over the last year and a half is a more conscious effort by the government of Pakistan when it does have to take certain military actions in populated areas, that they've learned some lessons from the approach they took in the Malakand and Swat and Mangora areas, as they've moved into Waziristan, with better joint civilian planning for better pre-staging of supplies for populations that escape from those areas because of the fighting, and for better pre-planning to go back in to try to re-establish stability in those areas. To me, that's a signal of better consciousness both within the military of the Pakistan government and the civilian sides of the importance of doing these kinds of stabilization efforts for their security in a more humane way and for more rapid recovery.
Well, it seemed that the more stable the government, the more effective our aid would be to the people of Pakistan. I would assume that we will be supporting them in those endeavors and hope that they will be able to do a better job of controlling their country and the various factions in there. Otherwise, the aid's going to fall in the wrong hands, I would assume. Do you have any way to measure how our aid is being effective, how effective it is? You know, the number of schools or water projects, or more kids being educated, or more people having less disease. I mean, do you have some measurable way of seeing what we've been doing, what the outcomes are?
Yeah, in those areas where we operate, we do baseline surveys, we do monitoring, we do interim assessments as well to see how many more children are able, in the certain catchment basin, let's say, of population, able to get some minimal primary education, for example. How many more girls are coming back into school because we've combined a feeding program like our Head Start, for example, so that in fact they are more motivated to come into school. We do monitor maternal child health statistics and maternal morbidity and infant mortality. So those are the kinds of measures we try to take as we operate. What kind of community development activities, how much community participation we're getting, including female participation in the communities, especially difficult in areas of FATA, for example. We do have ways to do that, and if you would like more information, we can make that available to the committee.
I would also add that the White House has undertaken their metrics process, which has been ongoing over the past 6 or 8 months, and I know that the first report due to Congress, I believe, will come at the end of this month. Regarding FATA in particular, just to amplify what Jim said, I think there is a sense that because of the security issues, because of other ongoing concerns, that there's not necessarily much that we've been able to do there, and that's very much not the case. Just since September 2009, USAID and OTI have completed 32 activities totaling over $1.6 million. These have included repaving 7 roads, 15 water supply and sanitation activities, 4 flood protection walls, 3 electricity system rehabilitations.
Okay, very good. That was my question. And before my time runs out, I got one more question. I think
Sure.
I didn't want to interrupt you here, but I do have one more question I want to get to real quickly. I know in Afghanistan we are using the National Guard operation, where we have National Guard individuals who have a background in agriculture to come in and help train and work with the Afghanis to try and teach them some different farming methods, as well as help establish new markets for their farming products. Is there something like that is being thought of as a way to implement in Pakistan, as a way to gain the trust of the Pakistani people, the various factions there? Because I know that seems to be what's working in Afghanistan, and it's a great way to turn the people to realize that we're there to help, not to harm. Is there anything like that under consideration, or is that strictly something that's only going on in Afghanistan? And, Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate your indulgence.
At this time, no, although I must say we are extremely grateful to the U.S. the National Guard from, I think, 9 states now in Afghanistan that are operating there on agriculture development teams, together with U.S. Department of Agriculture and our own AID advisors. At this time, as to the best of my knowledge, we're not planning or thinking of that on the Pakistan side. We have other ways to deliver agriculture-related assistance, together with USDA, by the way.
Well, the reason for the question was you made the comment about building relationships with the people. We have to earn their trust, and it seems to be working in Afghanistan. I was seeing if that would be something you'd be thinking about, is trying to earn the trust of the people of Pakistan as well. Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate your indulgence. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Thanks for your questions. Mr.